What's good, everybody? It's your boy, the Real AG, here, back at you again on the Lockdown Defense Sports Network. And you guys guessed it, it's another week, another round of previews. The Hit Squad is back, dropping content each and every day. This week, looking at the NFC North. As you know, your boy hits lead off when we do these previews. So we're looking at the Bears up in Chicago. First and foremost, it was definitely a 2024 season to be forgotten for Chicago. Ultimately ended up going 5-12, fourth in the NFC North. Ironically, it was a hell of a start to the season for them. They were 4-2 going into their bye in week 7, and then just downhill from there. Did not win a game again until week 18. And, in my opinion, ultimately wasted Caleb Williams' rookie season. Hopefully did not damage him too bad into 2025. But, left 2024 with a lot of questions that needed to be answered. Had to make a lot of changes. Some people had to lose their jobs and they had to move on just to hopefully right the ship. Let's just break down this 2025 preview here and just kind of look at what they did. So, as a whole, I would say, the Bears had an A to A+ offseason, in my opinion. They absolutely crushed, every facet of developing their roster for this upcoming season. Some may say they had some questionable moves in the draft. That's fine. But to me, they absolutely crushed it in free agency. They absolutely crushed it in making deals or trades to, acquire some players that certainly will help beef things up. They absolutely crushed it in the coaching carousel and, just answered all the questions that they had burning after 2024. Are clearly maximizing on Caleb Williams' rookie deal and building out the roster as extensively as they can while he's on the cheap. They drastically improved their offensive line across the board, and, they beefed up their pass rush. So, looking at kind of the first facet of their offseason here, in their notable free agent signings or re-signings, if you will, the big retainers for me are linebacker TJ Edwards and corner Kyler Gordon. I think it was good for them to, re-sign and keep them on in the fold. I think they're big ticket free agents here. You got to look at the big three at the top, starting with edge rusher Dayo Odengbo, from the Colts. I think that's a great fit for the new defensive coordinator scheme. It's a pretty reasonable contract at 3 years, $48 million for a young, versatile edge rush player that I think can just bring a valuable presence to the Bears defense. Then you move down the list. They signed, veteran interior D lineman Grady Jarrett from the ATL for 3 years, $43.5 million. Again, I think this is an immediate impact signing. You get that veteran leadership in the heart and soul of your defense. But he is 32, so we'll see where Father Time is on that. And then, the first prong to drastically rebuilding the offensive line here, former center, got to give praise where it's due, but that's, signing Drew Dahlman, the highly touted center in this free agency class, also from the ATL for 3 years, $42 million. So, first and foremost, you want to beef up the O-line, starts with the middle of it. Some may disagree, but that is your quarterback of the offensive line. They have invested some early draft capital in tackles and, just needed a veteran and established player to kind of help lead them and get them in the right spots and right situations. So, number one thing to do if you want to improve your offensive line, start with the center, and they got the best one in the free agency class. So, I think those are the 2 or 3 huge signings. Obviously, see some other signings here. They added a little to their receiver room with Duvernay, Zachis, and then I probably butchered that name, but hey, what can we do? And then, the big trades, continuing on the theme of beefing up the cattle up front. Obviously, traded for my boy Joe Thuney with the Chiefs. Only gave up a 2026 fourth rounder for that. And ironically, on the same exact day they got Joe Thuney, they traded with the Rams for guard Jonah Jackson, giving up a 2025 sixth rounder. So, right here, before the draft even started, they got their center, they got their, all-pro left guard, and they got another guard to come in and compete and potentially just, improve everything from an offensive line standpoint. So, again, just answered the huge questions there. And then, moving on to the draft, Like I said, some people maybe scratch their heads at some of the picks they made, but I honestly love the picks, especially their first four, really. Again, continuing on the theme of getting as much talent as they can around Caleb, um, you know, beefing up their O-line and just adding some potential depth or, players that have the tools and, see what they could develop into. But like I said, I think their first four picks were all pretty much consistently considered to be well regarded, great value. Some may even call them steals. You do look at the first round, they took Colston Loveland, the tight end out of Michigan. Second round, I think, is a steal. Got my boy MIZ till I die, but got my boy Luther Burden the third out of Mizzou. Ozzy Trapillo is definitely an enticing one from the standpoint of beefing up your O-line because he can play multiple positions across the line. So, again, adding young depth that can play pretty much anywhere, maybe outside of center. And that's, certainly a valuable thing to have for a team that's trying to figure things out up there. And then Shamar Turner, the interior D lineman out of Texas A&M, I think is a great pick as well. So, again, addressed all their needs. But, I think the big questions from the draft is, they did not seem to really emphasize edge rusher early, and maybe that's just how the board fell. I know some Bears fans and just some NFL fans were a little perplexed at them not really trying to address running back or get some competition in there for DeAndre Swift. But, it is what it is in terms of that. But overall, love the picks that the Bears made. I think they had a pretty completed draft, and again, just continued to answer the questions that needed to be addressed in this offseason heading into 2025. Looking at the ultimate trades, I already talked about the two big trades they made with Joe Thuney and Jonah Jackson. Everyone knows the coaching debacle that was 2024 for the Bears, are really just the past few years. It's kind of been an unstable little carousel just hovering around. But, I think they knocked it out of the park with their coaching hire, bringing over Ben Johnson from their rival Detroit Lions. But, he was the most coveted coach in this hiring cycle. Honestly, probably had his pick of wherever he wanted to go. And it's got to feel good to know he chose to come to Chicago, wanted to work with Caleb, and, hopefully bring some of the offensive / QB guru-esque-ness that he has, from Detroit. Looking at what he did in Detroit as the offensive coordinator, his offenses averaged a league best 29 points per game from 2022 to 2024. So if he could just bring a little sprinkle of that, that's a drastic improvement for what they saw last year and a few years prior to that. Looking at the offensive coordinator brought in was Declan Doyle, he was the tight ends coach for the Bears. Not the Bears, sorry, for the Broncos last year. So, enticing to see Ben Johnson bring someone over from the Sean Payton tree. And I'm kind of excited to see how much creativity they cook up with Caleb and the offensive weapons that they have. And then, I kind of prefaced it a little earlier looking at the free agents, but, did bring in a new D coordinator in Dennis Allen, the former head coach of the Raiders and the Saints. But I honestly love making that type of move when they have a rookie head coach, just bring someone in who's been in that position to kind of help bounce ideas and collaborate. And then, he is an established D coordinator. He has pretty consistent to borderline elite defenses when he has, the right players. So, again, knocked it out of the park with their coaching hires and, making the moves that they needed to make. So looking at the 2025 schedule, there it is right there. Overall, kind of like the Giants, the Bears did not have a great 2024 season and then ultimately got totally shafted in their strength of schedule because they have the second hardest schedule for 2025. 10 games against 2024 playoff teams, and then 11 games against teams with a 500 or better record in 2024. So it's going to be an uphill climb, but I think that they are on the right track. I think they made the moves to right the ship. I'm not going to call for a totally drastic changing of the guard here in the NFC North, but I think the Bears in 2025 take a step in the right direction. We see some great improvement and, ultimately establish the building blocks for the next year in the continued regime that will be Ben Johnson's tenure in Chicago. So my overall offseason grade, I was torn in between A to A plus, but I mean, you heard me rave about all the moves they made. I wanted to give it an A plus, but I scratched my head at some of the draft picks that they made. So I'm going to just hover around and not really stick to one. So we'll say A to A plus. My overall 2025 prediction record wise, I got them at 8-9, which I think is a pretty good improvement from the 5-12 that they were in 2024. So, just kind of quickly going through the schedule here. You know what? I got them winning week 1 against the Minnesota Vikings, NFC North showdown right out of the gate. We don't know what Minnesota is going to look like moving on from Darnold. It's probably still trying to figure things out with J.J. McCarthy. So we're going to chalk that one up as a dub. Then, ironically, a back-to-back NFC North showdown. They got the former new coach going against his former squad against the Detroit Lions. I do have them losing that game. I got them winning week 3 against the Cowboys. I got them winning week 4 against the Raiders. So right off the gate, kind of like 2024, they're going to be, 3-1 going into the bye at week 5. Hot take here maybe, but we all saw how the game ended last year against the Commanders, and I think Chicago bounces back and wins this game in week 6 against the Manders. I think they win in week 7. It's the Saints. You've heard me bag on them a few times now. We're going to continue down that train until they make some serious changes, which are not going to happen at this point. I think they lose in week 8 to the Baltimore Ravens. I think they lose in week 9 to the Cincinnati Bengals. I do think they win week 10 against the Giants. And then back to the NFC North showdown against the Vikings. I see them losing this go around. I think they lose to the Steelers in week 12. I think they lose to the Eagles in week 13. Sorry, Bears. I think they lose to the Packers in week 14. Then I think they beat the Browns week 15, bounce back against the Packers week 16 for a dub, and then lose to the 49ers week 17 and lose to the Detroit Lions in week 18. So as I said, overall prediction 8-9. I think that is, a step in the right direction. And like I as a whole, I think the one word to describe how Bears fans should feel going into the season is upbeat. All the questions were answered about what they're going to do to help Caleb. They drastically improved their O-line. They brought in an established D coordinator to kind of help beef up an already decent defense. So, again, I think all the building blocks are going to be put in place. Some steps are going to be made in the right direction, but I'm not calling for, a total 180. Bears win the NFC North and are forced to be reckoned with next season. But, that is my overall breakdown for the Bears up in Chi-Town. As always, if you, love what I said, Bears Nation, please let me know below. Like, comment, and subscribe on the video. If you want to get at me or any of the other Hit Squad members on social media, there's that info right there. You can see me right in the middle, Chiefs Insider. Come on, get at me. If you love this content and are looking for more of our content, you can find it pretty much across all social media platforms. That is the kickoff of our NFC North preview for this week, looking at the Chicago Bears. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, I will see you when I see you. And make sure y'all out there stepping up and locking down, baby.